Caching allows us to remember or cache information that we get back from a source of data, so that next time we ask for the same information, we don't need to make another request. When we cache data, we have two possible sources to respond to a request, either the internet or our cache. Our cache starts out empty, which guarantees that our first response will come from the internet. So now when we make a request to this URL, then because it's not in our cache yet, we're going to make that request over the internet, which is going to give us some text back, and we're going to associate that URL with that text in our cache. Now the next time we ask for data from the same URL, then we can see that it's in our cache, and we can get data back from our cache rather than making another request to the internet. If we make a request now to a different URL, we see that it's not in our cache, and so we make that request to the internet, get some data back, and then store the response and that URL in our cache. So let's write this out in code. Our cache is going to be a dictionary where the keys are URLs and the values are the text that we get back for that URL. We'll start it out as an empty dictionary. And I'm going to define a function getWithCaching whose parameters are modeled after the requests.get method. So there's a base URL and a dictionary of parameters. Now, assuming that we imported the requests library, we're going to use this code to get the full URL of our requests. And you shouldn't actually need to remember or know how this works. The only thing to know here is that essentially what this code does is it takes a base URL in list of parameters and it gets the full URL without actually making the request. If we called request.get, then we could get the URL from there, but this would also be making the request on the internet, which would defeat the purpose of caching. So instead we write this code which gets the full URL and assigns it to the variable full URL without actually making a request. So now we need to decide whether to use the cache or not. We say that if the full URL is not in the cache dictionary, then we're going to need to actually make the request. So we write code that's actually going to send the request over the internet and add the response text to our cache. Then we return the cache item associated with that URL. So this line is going to run whether we got the data from the cache or from the internet. Okay, so great. This is actually caching code that works. Every time we call getWithCaching, we first check if an item is in our cache, and if it's not, then we make a request over the internet, and if it is, then we just return our cache's value for that URL. But there's a problem, because right now, we don't store data across sessions. In other words, if we stop our program and run it again, then cache dictionary starts out as an empty dictionary, and we lose our complete cache. So to make our cache persist across session runs, then we're going to store it in a file. I'll create this variable cache file name to store the name of the file that we're going to save our cache in. And we'll use JSON to convert our dictionary into a file that we can write. Now, every time that our cache changes, what we're going to do is we're going to first open up the cache file, and then we're going to write json.dumps in the contents of our cache dictionary and close the cache file. So that way, every time we add something new to our cache, then we update our cache file. But finally, we need to do one more thing, which is to add code that's going to open the cache file in the first place. So what we do is we add a try except block, and in the try block, we try to open the cache file, read it, and then load its JSON formatted string into cache dictionary. If this try block fails, then we can assume that this cache file doesn't exist yet, so we're just going to initiate cache dictionary as an empty dictionary. So caching allows us to remember information that we get back from the internet, so that if we're going to make the same request again, we don't have to make it over the internet. And the strategy that we take when caching is that when we create a dictionary that maps full URLs to the text that an API gives us back. There are many other details that we could add if we cared to, like having the cache items expire after a certain amount of time, but hopefully this is going to get you started and give you an idea of how you would actually do that.